Probably the biggest gaping hole for me in my online 20 plus chapter analysis of The Shining. My analysis lacks a detailed decoding of the film's chronology in terms of time. I don't mean the time of the production of the movie, I mean the timeline within the story. There are a couple of chapters that specifically deal with the issue of the story shifting back and forth along the US history timeline, with different generations of the Torrance and Grady families representing different generations of America and Europe. You can go and read those if you want, I won't go into them here. But that doesn't explain the strange time-related caption screens that pop up arbitrarily throughout the movie. Chronologically, they appear as follows. First, the interview. This appears after the opening Mountain Drive titles. Second, closing day. This appears after the psychiatrist interview and before the Torrance family driving to the Overlook. Remember also that the psychiatrist interview was not originally in the European release, but the extended American version has been released in Europe since then. Third, a month later. This appears after Danny and Halloran discuss their shining powers and before Danny riding his tricycle around the Colorado Lounge. Then Tuesday. This appears between Danny and Wendy walking around the maze and before Danny trying to enter a locked room 237. Then Thursday, this appears between Jack's argument with Wendy about being interrupted while he's writing, and before Wendy and Danny have a snowball fight. Next up is Saturday. This appears after Jack is seen staring devilishly out the Colorado Lounge window, and before Wendy is speaking to the ranger office on the radio. Next up, Monday. This appears after the dead twins scene and before the fatherly love scene. After that is Wednesday. This appears after the fatherly love scene and before Danny enters the opened door to room 237. And then we have 8 a.m. This appears after Halloran phones the ranger for a third time and before he is seen on an airplane. And after that, 4 p.m. This appears after Wendy finds the Snowcat engine sabotaged and before Jack speaks to Grady through the storeroom door. So that's all of the time captions throughout the movie, in order. There's 10 of them. Here are the captions in the sequence that they appear in the movie in between various scenes. In particular, the use of weekdays to mark out the film's timeline is baffling. Why not use actual dates like September 14th, October 2nd, November 7th, etc.? This would establish a running timeline that would show how many months the Torrances are into their Overlook visit. The first 3 days, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, those are acceptable chronologically if the intention is to convey that all the events surrounding those captions occur within a single week. But then we jump to Monday and then Wednesday. So are these two latter days intended to take place in the week immediately following? And are we to assume that the 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. events occur on Thursday, which follows the day after Wendy discovers Danny's injuries and Jack encounters the hag in room 237, that was described as Wednesday? So why not say Thursday 8 a.m., Thursday 4 p.m? See how vague these captions are? And Kubrick was so renowned for being meticulous about everything. Why would he just have these really vague time captions? If these weekday captions are to be taken as occurring in immediate chronology after each other, then this would mean that the time between Danny and Wendy walking around the maze and Jack being frozen in the maze consists of just 9 days. However, there's a major continuity problem at work: the dramatic change in weather. A shift from sunny autumn, when we see Danny and Wendy running into the maze in which we see no dead leaves on the Overlook lawns at all, a shift from that to a winter so harsh that snow has piled up dozens of feet against the walls of the hotel. This would not occur in 9 days. This throws the film's weekday captions to the wind, leaving us with little idea of how much time it has taken for winter to set in, or how much time passes between major scenes. I mean, there are no sort of in-between shots where, there's only a little bit of snow building up at the start of the winter. There's none of that. And, Kubrick was so meticulous, he could have done that if he wanted to. It's also questionable why the hotel closes for more than a month before it begins to snow. That's a month's profits down the drain. Now, we could just easily assume that the specifics of time don't matter in a film like The Shining, and so Kubrick was just being liberal with the details. But the following production papers, which I found on the excellent overlookhotel.com site, these documents show Kubrick's meticulous attention to the depiction of time. In these documents, he describes in detail the time frame of Halloran's journey from Miami to the Overlook Hotel. Another example of the careful attention to timing in the film's production is the continuity of clocks and watches in the scenes leading up to and including Jack being locked in the storeroom. It begins with Wendy telling Danny she's going to speak to Jack for a few minutes, and her watch displays the time as 6:30, presumably that's PM considering the daylight setting. After she knocks Jack out in the Colorado lounge, we fade to the storeroom scenes, and both the wall clock and Wendy's watch read the time as 6:55, so that's approximately 25 minutes later from this scene. This continuity Polaroid from the production establishes the careful attention to the display of time in this particular scene. It isn't enough just to simply have the time blocked off in 5-minute increments at say 6:55. It has to be right down to the minute, 6:56. That's very precise continuity work, but Kubrick then goes and spoils it completely. Jack shouts through the storeroom door that Wendy should check out the snowcat and radio, which she does. So the time should then be anywhere between say 7 o'clock and maybe 7:30 at the latest. Not so. Wendy looks at the sabotage snowcat engine and we cut to a caption screen that says 4 p.m. That's nearly 3 hours earlier than when Jack was locked in the storeroom. It's an atrocious piece of continuity, completely unnecessary and easily avoided. And there are other bizarre time-related errors which we'll explore shortly. Now, for a long time, I'd been planning to do a comprehensive dissection of time-related details in The Shining, and my working assumption was that there might be a logic behind it which would result in an altered chronology of scenes that fitted with the film's hidden themes, especially the historical ones. These statements from Halloran in the movies suggested this to me.
Just like they can see things that haven't happened yet. Well, sometimes they can see things that happened a long time ago.
However, the more I cross-referenced the time errors, the less likely it seemed that there would be a specific hidden chronology among the time mismatches. A fan of my work on The Shining, Will Hunter, emailed me in November 2013, and he outlined to me his belief that the mismatching times in the film are simply another disorientation device, much like the spatially impossible sets, and that this was done to generally unease the viewer. Supporting this, Will pointed out to me the mismatches of time in the backstory of Jack's violent abuse of Danny. I'll talk more about that shortly. And I have to agree with Will Hunter on this. Lights in the hotel switch themselves on and off between different takes, confusing us. It's quite a clever variation on the old lights flickering on and off. In ghost stories, Kubrick does it subliminally by having it occur between different shots so that we don't consciously notice it. And then, as I've talked about before, prop positions and set layouts throughout the film are all just completely all over the place, wild, crazy, in ways that simply do not match the meticulousness of Kubrick's filming style. And so it only makes sense also that Kubrick would opt to do the same thing with our perception of time in the film. Here's some related details. Ullman tells Jack the hotel season runs from May 15th to October 30th, which means the hotel is unoccupied for 6.5 months. But Jack tells him, 5 months of peace is just what I want. Now, we could assume that the guests, that they stop visiting the hotel several weeks before staff hand over to the winter caretaker, and that they start visiting again several weeks after the winter caretaker is relieved by staff in spring, hence it's 5 months of peace for Jack. This would explain why Jack would only be needed as caretaker for 5 months. However, Ullman tells the Torrances on closing day,
it's amazing how much activity's going on today.
Yes, well, the guests and some of the staff left yesterday, but the last days are always very hectic. Everybody wants to be on their way as early as possible.
So the 5 months thing just doesn't work. Also, Ullman had already cited that the season ends on October 30th, which means that the Torrance family arrived at the Overlook Hotel on October 31st, which just happens to be Halloween. Creepy, eh? Also conflicting with the seasonal dates offered by Ullman, the script for the deleted ending scene states that the hotel is open each year from May 20th to September 20th, meaning it would be closed for 7 months. Another mismatch is that Jack shouts at Wendy in the Colorado lounge that he has agreed to look after the Overlook Hotel until May the 1st, and he tells Lloyd the bartender that he was worried that the money in his wallet was going to be there until next April. But again, all this mismatches. If the Torrance family arrived on October 31st, then 5 months from that day would only take it up to November, December, January, February, March. That leaves out April and May. Something else is that the various morning and evening exterior shots of the hotel mismatch each other with regard to the position of the sun. Jack's interview scene at the beginning is supposed to be morning time. A blade clock in the cutaway scene to Danny and Wendy is hard to read, but it certainly isn't afternoon. When Jack calls Wendy to inform her he has the job, Danny has a Shining episode and passes out, and he is then seen by a psychiatrist. But according to the clock in Wendy's kitchen, it's still between 11 and 12 a.m. And that time is even matched by the psychiatrist's watch. So on that basis, we should assume that in the opening helicopter shot of the Overlook Hotel, the morning sun has risen from the east, which appears to be on our right, but the shadows of the trees actually suggest that the sun is already very high up in the sky. Sun positions are also all over the place in the mountain range shots at the beginning too, although we can kind of forgive that. We could say, oh, Kubrick just wanted the shots that looked the best. But, the guy was pretty obsessed with detail, and, maybe he deliberately had the sun do this, shifting about all over the place so that it seems like one time a day from another as we go along. And, the directions at which the sun is shining upon the car vary quite a lot. I don't know. I haven't really gone into that in a lot of detail. It's just something that you might want to go and look at yourself. But in this first shot of The Shining, east must be to the right, considering the angle of the shadows from the trees. The sun is somewhere over, very high up to the right, and so we would assume that east is over to the right. But that is totally mismatched when the Torrance family travel together to the hotel on the morning of closing day. The morning sun now shines on the hotel from our left. So which way is really east and west in these hotel exterior views? Then we go to the exterior shot that appears that says a month later. And just before Wendy awakens Jack for breakfast, the hotel is now lit in the morning from the right again. So again, it appears that east is over there on the right, and this would mean that the mountain in the background is to the north of the hotel. Later on, the hotel is seen with the sun below the horizon to our left. This is on Tuesday, and it's just before Danny tries to enter the locked room 237. Now, is this dusk or dawn? Well, the Steadicam shot of Danny riding about near room 237, this gives us very brief glimpses of the daylit Colorado lounge windows. So we can only assume that the exterior shot that came just before this was morning, with the sun rising in the east to our left instead of to our right. From here on, the hotel shots become so obscured by snow and clouds that the position of the sun is unnoticeable. But regarding the autumn shots, it's very sloppy continuity work. These shots were no doubt filmed with a duration long enough for Kubrick to choose the appropriate level of lighting he required for each dawn and dusk exterior shot, yet their inclusion in the film mismatches blatantly and repeatedly in terms of east versus west and morning versus evening. The chances of this happening by accident, I think, are kind of unlikely. The footage would no doubt have been labelled according to the time of day it was shot, and even if it wasn't, it would have been noticeable during the viewing of the footage whether the sun was rising or falling on either horizon. I strongly suspect this collection of errors to be another Kubrick trick, a deliberate confusion of time and space. Not so much an error, but perhaps an interesting revelation, is that Jack tells Ullman his trip to the Overlook took 3.5 hours. He later tells Wendy over the phone that he won't be able to get home before 9 or 10. Is this true, or is he simply making an excuse to spend some more time away from her, as he does when the family are actually in the Overlook itself? Wendy tells the psychiatrist that they've been living in Boulder for, quote, about 3 months. And she says that Danny's visions of his imaginary friend Tony started when he was put in nursery school, and she finishes by telling the story of Jack dislocating Danny's arm, which resulted in Jack having had no alcohol for, quote, 5 months. Now, Will Hunter, whose email prompted me to write this video, pointed out the peculiar similarity that Jack tells Ullman that he wants, quote, 5 months of peace. And as has been pointed out by many online bloggers, Jack tells Lloyd the barman that his injuring of Danny occurred, quote, 3 goddamn years ago, end quote. He also tells Lloyd before taking his first drink of whiskey,
Here's to 5 miserable months on the wagon and all the irreparable harm that it's caused me.
Wendy said he'd been off the booze for 5 months. They've been in the hotel for at least a month. So why is he saying 5 miserable months on the wagon when it should be at least 6? Makes no sense, does it? One email correspondent pointed out to me that after a month of staying at the Overlook, Wendy shouldn't be able to cook eggs for Jack's breakfast, as any stored eggs would no longer be fresh. Maybe we could say that they drove out from the hotel to some nearby town or something to buy some eggs. I don't know. But like I say, somebody sent me an email to that effect, so I just thought I'd mention it. During Wendy's telephone call to the ranger station, we see that the ranger's wall clock reads 11:40. This would have to be AM because daylight is viewable through Ullman's window during the conversation. However, the scene then cuts straight to the scene of Danny encountering the dead twins, but behind the twins, a window reveals the exterior of the hotel to be pitch black. And we can only assume that a big jump of time occurred between these two scenes. But typically, a big jump of time is established by a dissolve shot between scenes instead of a rapid jump like occurs here. Jack's nightmare scene in the Colorado lounge occurs at 3:30 p.m. according to the wall clock scene in the basement, where Wendy comes running from to awaken him. This scene fades to Jack entering the gold room, but there are no windows to let us know if it's day or night. Curiously, the gold room entrance sign which Jack glances at gives late evening opening times for the gold room. And why aren't the doors to this room closed anyway? It's not like the family are supposed to be spending time in there. The sign also includes the phrase, the unwinding hours. Yeah, sure, unwinding gets used as a sort of a way of, a metaphor for people chilling out, but perhaps it's a curious hint regarding clocks and watches in this film. Is this another attempt to throw our sense of time to the winds? At this point, several hours of the story seem to just disappear. If Wendy blamed Jack for Danny's neck injury at about 3:35 p.m, then why does it take until night time for Jack to talk to himself in the Gold Room bar and then make his way to inspect room 237, at which point the draped curtains of room 237 and lack of exterior light shining through them indicates that it's a night scene. As for the Gold Room ball scene, this begins with our view of the entrance sign. There have been no screen captions verifying what day of the week this is, but shortly after Jack's conversation with Grady, a wall clock near Ullman's office, very prominent clock, has the time as 11:46 p.m. This in turn establishes that the first two scenes of Halloran calling the ranger's office also occurred before midnight. Following this, we have the monotonous scenes of Halloran making his way to the Overlook by plane, car and snowcat. Through his journey, times are emphasised. He repeatedly looks at his watch. A caption reads 8 a.m. He asks a stewardess on the plane what time they get to Denver, an entirely unnecessary piece of boring dialogue. He tells Durkin it will take him about 5 hours to drive from Stapleton Airport to switch over to the Snowcat, and this fits with Kubrick's handwritten notes about his journey. So we've got a double thing going on with time in this movie. We've got mismatches of time, really bad continuity of time all over the place in this movie, and at the same time we have an emphasis on characters looking at their watches, and we have screen captions showing us time and days of the week and so on. It's almost like Kubrick is drawing our attention to the absurd time of the movie. I think there's a lot more of this stuff in the movie from what I recall, but here I've just outlined what I consider to be the more interesting examples. So I'll just finish with one more example. All of the guest photos in the Overlook are either black and white or sepia, as in brown and white. But the movie itself is supposed to take place in the 1970s. So why is it almost exclusively black and white photos of people who visited the hotel? Why are there no colour ones? You've been listening to Rob Ager. Check out my other film analysis at collativelearning.com and on my YouTube channels. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.